Lori and I arrived at the Rue Santa Fe in Cabo, Mexico on Wednesday, September 10th. It started out to be the perfect vacation. Our room had an oceanside view, and in the background was the beautiful Cabo Arch. Day 2 of our vacation, we actually rented a wave runner and we jet skied out real close to that world-famous arch. There were several swimming pools that were absolutely breathtaking. One of my favorite things to do is just to frolic in the ocean. Here I am gazing at the view with my birthday ponytail on the 11th of September. Thursday greeted us with our daily noon water aerobics, a huge barbecue by the pool, and amazing pineapple drinks. Each day we made reservations to dine at the resort specialty restaurants. Some of our choices were steakhouses, an Asian restaurant, and of course a Mexican restaurant. Saturday, the day before the hurricane hit, we booked a trip to the mountains to go ziplining. There were rumors that a tropical storm could pass by on Sunday, bringing a chance of rain. We zipped here, we zipped there. We crossed many canyons. We used cables. We crossed on wires. We crossed on flimsy bridges. We rappelled down mountains. The grand finale was called the Superman Zipline. It was almost a mile long, and you flew in the air face first at speeds of 65 to 80 miles per hour. Life was very, very good in Cabo. After returning from ziplining Saturday afternoon, we actually made light of the fact that a hurricane was actually coming, because they had said it was going to be a Category 2 and it was heading out to sea. The hurricane is approaching, probably my first and hopefully my only hurricane. The waves are getting bigger, as you see. They have closed off the beach and I'm down here illegally. Whoa! The waves are intensifying, the hurricane is getting closer. And we're in alert. We have to be in our rooms by 7 o'clock. Never been in a hurricane before this.
We're reporting from Cabo, Mexico. Hurricane Odile is on its way in, supposedly going to hit tomorrow at 2 a.m. We're here next to the ocean as long as we can, and apparently we're going to be locked in our rooms and they're going to serve us room service.
So
not the way I expected to spend the last 2 days of our vacation.
Wow.
The waves are awesome and it's great fun looking at all of this. So it's an experience. Bob and I are adventure seekers, and so we're here to do that.
This is our first hurricane.
This is our first hurricane we're going to live through. So we'll have more pictures coming as the hurricane unfolds in Cabo.
Much more intense right now. But then everything changed. Sunday morning, what began as a Category 2 tropical storm heading out to sea switched directions and headed directly towards Cabo, intensifying to a Category 4 hurricane. Believe it or not, airlines were still sending flights to Cabo Sunday afternoon. The tourists were arriving at their motels and resorts, being told to barricade themselves in their room until after the hurricane was over. Watch and listen as the hurricane approaches. Well, the hurricane is about 1/2 hour away. You see the white caps. Things are getting pretty wild out here. Okay, it's just about getting dark now. Wow. Wind's blowing like crazy through here. There's actually white caps down in the swimming pool down there. Nothing you can see that way. Everything is intensified. The rain has started coming really hard now, and a lot stronger winds. We're getting some major wind here now. Okay. Boy, there's a lot of heavy rain now. Yeah, it's crazy out there. After about 12 hours, the hurricane is finally over. It's pitch black. There's no air conditioning, no electricity, no running water. All we can do is wait until daylight. Our resort had been devastated. Our remaining time in Cabo, I didn't take many pictures or videos because I had to save my cell phone battery for emergency use. We ventured out that morning in water and mud up to our knees. There were no resort workers to be found anywhere. The cars in the parking lot were almost completely underwater. We talked to people that were on the bottom level who woke up to water coming over their beds. They had to evacuate to higher ground. People on the top floor had water coming through their roofs, and it soaked everything in the room, including their bed. After hearing those stories, we were very thankful that we had a dry room. The water has sand in it, dirty. Oh man, doesn't look as pretty anymore, does it? Tuesday, everyone lost cell phone service. Workers eventually started showing up at the resort and tried to clear a dry path to the food line. We would stand in line for 2 hours waiting for a small portion of food. The report that day was to stay put. The government was working on a plan. Tuesday night was hot, muggy, miserable. So instead of Lori and I both sleeping, I snored and my wife prayed. I truly believe that that prayer led to our miraculous escape the next day. This picture sums up our life for the past 2 days. The guy on the left is filling up his bucket so he can flush the toilet. The woman on the right is washing her clothes in the dirty pool water. Wednesday morning, everything changes. The resort is now telling us to get out. The looters are finished looting the town and they're coming to the resort. Prisoners escaped from the prison and it's not safe to stay in your rooms anymore. They only had enough food and water for a couple more meals. They also said that the government would fly us free to any of 4 cities, including Tijuana, Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara, or Mexico City. The only problem was the runway was 40 miles away and they were not providing transportation, and nobody was coming in and out of our resort. To make things worse, if we did get to the airport, my cell phone was dead, and I couldn't call Marcia, my travel agent, to find out which city we should go to. I knew things were bad when I asked Lori if I should go into the city among the looters and look for electricity to charge my cell phone, and without hesitation she said, "Go." It was over a quarter mile to the city on an old path that was covered in water. I reached the city to find hundreds of looters, many buildings missing walls, but there was no electricity anywhere. I was on my way back to tell Lori the bad news when I met a man who owned land behind the Holiday Inn. I told him that I was desperate, and I needed a charge for my cell phone. He took a look at my phone and said, "Hey, that's the same one I have." He had a charger in his pickup and plugged my cell phone into his charger. For the next 30 minutes as the phone charged, we had a time to talk and to bond. His name was Joe, and he had 2 houses that blew down in the hurricane behind the Holiday Inn. He didn't have enough gas to get to a functional gas station, so he had been sleeping at night by a fire that he had built from the wood from his houses. This fire was used to keep the mosquitoes away. Joe had horses, chickens, pigs, dogs, and goats. He was a motivational speaker, and he used his animals to help people face their fears. On the way back to the resort, I was praying and waiting for a cell phone signal to call Marcia. Phone service had been restored that morning. I told Marcia when I got a hold of her that I had 10% battery charge, and where should we go? After hearing the choices, she said Mexico City. She asked, should we be safe and shoot for Friday? I said no. Make reservations for Thursday afternoon. I don't know how, but I believe we're going to get out of here. I get back to Lori, and she tells me that the resort will not let us stay another night. Another young couple we met earlier, scared to death, asked if they could come with us if we found a ride. I told Lori I have no other choice. I'm going to go back to Joe. I arrived back at Joe's just as his hired hand Mario had shown up with his Bronco. Joe asked Mario, "Can you please help my friend get to the airport?" Mario said he only had a half tank of gas and that it was crazy out there, but that he would do it for Joe. Mario drove me to the entrance of the resort. I ran up and whistled to Lori. I said, "Get over here now. I have a ride." Lori brought the other couple, and Mario agreed to take us all. He had enough room in the back of his Bronco for our suitcases and a gas container for Joe's pickup, so he could get to a gas station. I remember clearly what Joe said as we were leaving. He told me he had no idea how he was going to get gas. He said, "God works in mysterious ways. Safe travel, my friend." Mario was Mexican, but could speak enough English to carry on a conversation. The highway to the airport was blocked off because of looters, but Mario, being Mexican, was able to convince the gatekeeper to let us out. He amazingly dodged looters all the way to the main entrance. On the way to the airport, Mario and I bonded also. He had 4 kids and a small child at home. He had worked for Joe for 8 years. He told me Joe was an entrepreneur and a very successful businessman and landowner. There's no way you could tell that by looking at the humble and soft-spoken Joe. We finally made it to the airport and found it totally destroyed. There were Mexican military men everywhere with machine guns strapped to their chest. Mario talked to them and found the best place to drop us off. I asked him, "How much money do you want for this ride?" And he said, "Hey, don't worry, my friend, I don't need anything." We insisted he take all the cash we had to pay for his gas and a fill for Joe. We passed the gas station where he was going to have to fill, and there was a line of cars nearly a mile and a half long waiting to get gas. He reluctantly took the money. After saying goodbye with many thanks and a few tears, we stood in line for a flight to Mexico City. We stood in line in the hot sun for about 2.5 hours waiting for the flight. A Mexican girl, who we found out later worked in video production and photography, held an umbrella over Lori's head to protect her from the sun. Now what's the chance of that happening? Lori and I were some of the last to board the 727 military plane. We were escorted by some high-ranking Mexican officials, with cameramen taking pictures and recording our opinions on how the Mexican government was doing during this disaster. Believe me, we had nothing but great things to say about their government. They escorted us to the front of the plane into the first-class section. Box lunches and drinks were on the tables waiting for us, as well as the other people in the plane.
Actually, we just got done eating limes, and they were a little sour.
And we had a little coconut, too.
We had a coconut bar.
Lime and a coconut.
Yeah, lime and we had a great ham and cheese sandwich on whole wheat bread.
Tripulación de cabina saliendo de plataforma.
We're heading for Mexico City.
Here in Mexico City, here we come, and are we happy?
Yeah. About after a half hour of interviews, they said goodbye and also wished us safe travel. As the plane left the runway, everyone got very emotional. It was hard to hold back the emotions that we had felt the past 3 days. It was one of the most peaceful, enjoyable flights that I've ever flown. A couple hours later, the plane lands in Mexico City. The instructions are as usual, stay in your seats, but as we landed, everybody unfastened their seatbelts, stood up, and applauded. We finally felt safe. Government buses were waiting to take us to the main terminal. To our relief, there were 3 motels inside the airport. Guess who found us to show us the direction to the best motel? It was that same girl that held the umbrella for Lori. We registered, went to the room, and took showers for the first time in 4 days. We checked our email and Marcia had reserved us a flight to Dallas at 1:15 p.m. the next day. We landed in Rapid City Thursday evening around 11 p.m. and then headed for Pier. Back home and in our bed by 2 a.m. Friday morning. The reason I wanted to leave the country was to avoid any attention to my birthday, which was on September 11th. Well, that didn't happen. Like my friend Joe said, God does work in mysterious ways.
Kettleland Weekend News.
And the Pier mayor survives a dangerous hurricane in Mexico. And this week, Hurricane Odile hit a Mexican resort area, bringing extensive damage. Thousands of tourists evacuated, including 2 from South Dakota. Pier Mayor Lori Gill and her husband Bob. Kettleland's Dan Santella has their story.
Pier Mayor Lori Gill and her husband Bob arrived in Los Cabos on September 10 to celebrate Bob's 60th birthday. But on Sunday, Mother Nature dropped a giant rainstorm on the couple's birthday parade. Hurricane Odile brought 110-mile-per-hour winds, and by Monday, the Gills' hotel had transformed.
It turned into a 5-star resort to like a -10 resort because we were in mud and water up to our knees. People on the bottom floor woke up with water coming over the top of their bed.
While looking for supplies, Bob met a local, Joe, who would play a vital role in the couple's ability to evacuate. By Tuesday morning, both electricity and cell phone service were gone. On Wednesday, the hotel announced that only 2 meals worth of food remained, along with no bottled water. Help was available 40 miles away at the Los Cabos International Airport.
I talked to the manager and I said, "Are you kidding me? There's no taxis running. There's no organized way to get to the airport." He said, "I know, I'm sorry, but you need to do whatever you can to get to the airport. That's where the help is."
Their local friend's vehicle, unfortunately, was out of gas. Joe's employees, however, was not, and that man ended up driving the couple to the airport. The mayor credits her husband for taking the initiative when they had to resolve the situation.
He's the one here that went out and befriended this guy and found us the way out, and I totally admired him for that. When it came time for us to save ourselves, he would have done whatever it took to get us out of there.
Thanks to her husband's friendly overtures to Joe, quickly bonding over shared professions and faith, the Gills were able to leave Los Cabos on Wednesday, flying to Mexico City and eventually Dallas. Dan Santella, Kettleland News.
Oh, we're happy they were able to make it home safe. Well, the last of the same